Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us here today as we announce the results from Project Finito. I am pleased to be joined by Superintendent Steve Watts of Organized Crime Enforcement. The Toronto Police Services Organized Crime Enforcement Drug Squad Major Project Section and the Organized Crime Task Force are responsible for the success of this investigation with the support of Canada Border Services Agency and the Peel Regional Police Service. The Criminal Intelligence Service of Ontario also assisted the Toronto Police Service with this investigation through direct funding provided by the Government of Ontario. Project Finito was an investigation into the importation and distribution of large amounts of illicit drugs in the Greater Toronto Area. In front of me today, you can see that there's a staggering amount of crystal methamphetamine and cocaine that was destined for the streets of Toronto. The Toronto Police Service will continue to dedicate the resources necessary to keep dangerous drugs off the street, and I want to personally thank all of those members who participated in this investigation. I will now ask Superintendent Watts to discuss the case with more detail.
Good morning. Thank you, Deputy. It's my privilege to stand in front of you today and relay to you the results of this investigation. Project Finito was a 3.5-month investigation involving a major importation distribution network in the City of Toronto and GTA and beyond. It was involving crystal methamphetamine and powder cocaine. The very hard work of the members of the Toronto Police Major Drug Unit has resulted in the seizure of 551 kilos of cocaine, which you see to the right and left of me with bricks, and 441 kilos of crystal meth, which you see in the front in the bags. There's also one firearm seized, a vehicle seized, and a quantity of Canadian currency was seized as proceeds. This total of 992 kilograms of illicit drugs has an estimated street-level value of $90 million. It is the single largest seizure of crystal methamphetamine and powder cocaine in the history of the Toronto Police Service. 7 individuals have been arrested and charged and are alleged to have committed offenses in relation to these narcotics in front of you. As Deputy Johnson mentioned, the drugs were destined for the streets of Toronto and beyond and would have inflicted significant damage on our communities, both from a public safety and a public harm for all of our people that are suffering from the addiction of drugs. So intercepting the flow of these drugs has prevented many overdose deaths, as we know is a very heartbreaking and challenging aspect that's facing society today. This significant seizure demonstrates our commitment to community safety and the well-being of all members. I'd like to personally thank members of Toronto Police Major Drug Section, Organized Crime Task Force, Peel Region, Canada Border Services Agency, and the Criminal Intelligence Service of Ontario for their continued support in relation to these projects. I'll now take any questions in relation to this.
Can you speak about the seizure of these drugs, where they happened, when, under any circumstances of of this raid, or was it multiple raids? Or
yeah, there was a series of search warrants. I believe there was 9 search warrants conducted. So there was residential, business premise, vehicle search warrants. There was interdiction at the borders as well. So over the course since the summer of this year until late October, this investigation was ongoing.
As you said, this is a staggering number of drugs that you've confiscated and crimes that you've interrupted. Can you talk about the impacts this will have, especially when it comes to the costs on the streets?
Yes, thank you. That's a good question. We're often asked, does this make a difference? And I can tell you that this absolutely makes a difference. This amount of controlled substances taken off, it created a market fluctuation in Ontario. In essence, the price of cocaine going up significantly because of this seizure and because of the excellent work by our members.
We often hear about the toxic drug supply. Do you have a sense if this cocaine and this crystal meth, there's fentanyl in it, or is that something that's added after, or can you speak to to that aspect of it?
Yes. Toxic drug supply is a reference to essentially the street level cocktails that people are taking and people are consuming. So to your point, yes, more accurately, this I'm going to suggest and that this is all high level purity. The quants will be as part of the evidence. And to your point, it would be added later. So we know that crystal, cocaine, mixed with fentanyl, other opioid analogs, et cetera, that's where the toxicity comes in, and that's where the danger to our public lies.
We know that organized crime task force is involved here. Can you talk about the individuals who are facing charges, what you can say about them and their role within the system?
Well, I can talk that there's 7 of them. There's all GTA residents. 2 of them are still currently in custody. 5 have received bail. Their role would be obviously the responsibility of X amount of kilos. In any organization, different individuals are trusted with different levels of amounts of product. So the people that have been charged with this and that we're alleging have committed offenses are, I would say, at the runner level, but fairly high runner level. And because to be trusted with this amount, it's significant.
Was this seizure, these people that have been arrested and charged, are they part of a known or crime organization that you can speak to? Is there a specific gang that is responsible for this, or can you speak to the organized crime aspect of it?
I'm not going to speak to any specific organized crime. I mean, this is the conclusion. This is the end of the project, and I'm not going to speak to the evidence in terms of the source of this.
Where are the drugs coming from? What's the root? What do we know about that?
Well, we know that, I've often said the coca plant is not indigenous to North America. We know that. So it's coming from the south, and it's coming north. We know that this was crossing the border, primarily land border points, and coming from the U.S. into Canada.
You touched on this a little bit. Can you elaborate how big of a disruption this is to the business?
Well, I mean, I appreciate your question, and it's somewhat subjective, and so I can't, give a hard objective answer to that. The reality is, I've talked about it before, when you see this amount of product, and it's a commodity, and we've talked about basic supply and demand commodities. So when the price points change, that indicates disruption in the market. That indicates that there has been a significant change to the marketplace.
Just again, how historic this is for Toronto Police.
Well, once I said I can't overstate it. I've had the good fortune and the privilege to stand in front of you in front of other large drug seizures, but nothing to this size. So this is the largest. So it is extremely significant, and it's a credit to the men and women that don't stand in front of the mic, that are behind the scenes.
So this is a huge amount of drugs that have somehow crossed our border. Are you calling for anything from borders, services, from government to, somehow this did get up here, so there was some failure on some point along the process despite your success today? Is there anything you're calling for to ensure things like this don't continue to happen?
Yeah, this is not my platform to call for things. I'm not going to call for something. I'll make a statement that we're the largest undefended border in the free world. So it's a commodity, and it's not just narcotics, it's firearms. I've stood before you in front and talked to you about that before as well. So I'm not going to call anything. I'm just going to acknowledge the work and the significant impact this has resulted in terms of community safety and to the safety of our community overall.
One more? So you mentioned that these drugs were destined for the GTA and beyond.
Right.
Can you talk to us do you have a sense of where they were going and how long, these drugs would be supplied on the streets? Is it across the country, the GTA, or is there a sense of is this like a year's worth supply or 2 years? Do you know what I mean? Do we have a sense of that?
Right. What I will say is the flow of controlled substances, the flow of specifically these two, crystal and coke, essentially south to north, continental, south to north. Toronto's a major urban destination. We're a major distribution center, not only for Ontario, but also for Eastern and Central Western Canada. So you have it's Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal. We are the entry points and the distribution points for further distribution. And I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent. That concludes our conference for today. Thank you for attending.